Good morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are. I'm Paul Clark and welcome to my studio. So what have I got for you lovely lot today? Well, it's another one in my series of Around the World in Watercolour. And today we're going to go on a little safari to Africa and have a go at painting this lovely little Savannah scene. So before we start, I would just like to thank Jan and Jane for this lovely t-shirt which they gave me while we were in Gomera. So come and join me and we'll paint this scene step by step together. And here's the pencil sketch. There's no photo reference today because this has been made up from several photo references, but the drawing template is free as always to download from my website, link in the description below. Now, I've had several of you recently saying that you can't find where to get the free drawing templates. Now, just simply go to my website, address below, click on the drawing PDF button, top left-hand corner, then scroll down with the latest ones towards the bottom. Click on the image and then download to your device. Today's materials. My paper is some Arche. It's a cold press finish, £300, 100% cotton, super thick so it won't need stretching, but of course any decent watercolour paper will do. And for my colours today, it's a very limited palette, so I'm going to be using some cadmium yellow, burnt sienna, burnt umber, Payne's grey, and for my brushes I'm going to be using a large Harke, and from my range a 3/4 inch flat, number 12 and number 6 round, and of course my trusty number 3 rigger. Off we go, and starting by wetting the complete sky area with my large Harke brush. Then with my 3/4 inch flat and starting with my lightest value colour first, I'm dropping in some cadmium yellow, leaving plenty of spaces, and then straight away dropping in some burnt sienna. A touch of Payne's grey for some moody clouds. Then warming up some of these clouds with some burnt umber. All of this obviously going in while it's still wet. Now, while the sky is still damp, I'm just taking a dry tissue and dabbing out some little shapes of light. Next, I'm doing the same thing with the land here, clean water straight over this bottom section. And then painting in with my flat brush, lots of nice earthy colours. I'll list their names below. And I'm painting in here a few little dollops of clean water, hopefully to force some backgrounds and get some interesting effects. Now we need to let this totally dry, so it's a perfect time for a short break. And how about trying some full cream acacia? Not so sure. And next, using my number 12 brush and a nice watery mix of burnt umber for these distant hills. Just trying to keep the wash fairly flat. And here just adding in a little touch of Payne's grey into the mix. Now, to try and help to create a sense of distance, I'm just taking some clean water and softening the top here of these hills. And perhaps the suggestion of a few little low-lying wispy clouds. And the same along the bottom here, just softening with clean water. Next, for the suggestion of distant trees and bushes, I'm using a fairly concentrated mix of burnt umber and Payne's Grey, but softening some of the edges and putting in lighter values here and there. Just keeping it nice and simple, but making sure the bottoms are nice and flat. And here just a light wash dragged quickly across the paper, picking up the texture. I think to create this illusion of a grassy savanna you need lots of nice texture. And painting this in a real limited palette with sort of almost a monotone feel to it helps to create a nice mood and atmosphere. Now for the foreground here, and I'm painting in some clean water, then dropping straight away into it some of the dark brown mix. And for some extra texture, of course, we need a little bit of random splatting. Some going into the wet, some going into the dry. The sharpened wooden end of my brush to scratch in here some grassy details. Of course, you could use a stick. A little more dark splatting straight into the wet. And scratching again with the end of my brush. Okay, so when that's all totally dry, I'm going to start to paint the trees. I'm using the same mix again, but a much thicker consistency, and using my number 6 brush here, trying to get some dry brush texture on the edges. And here just painting in the trunks to connect them all together. Just softening the edges here with some clean water. It's always nice to have some soft edges as well as hard edges. And just lifting out here a little bit of light in the canopy. So these trees that you get in the African savanna, which I believe are possibly acacia trees, now they are often wider than they are tall, so it is important that you get the proportions roughly right. And next for this closer tree, and I'm using very much all the same techniques as previous, but I'm using my number 12 brush. Okay, so now it's time for the trusty number 3 rigger. It's just the perfect brush for these spindly little branches. All you need to do is to point the brush in the general direction and it does it for you. And the rigger brush again, it's perfect for little spindly grasses and gorse. Just lift off your brush with every stroke. Okay, so now it's time to paint the little gazelle, and I'm starting with my number 6 brush and a very watery wash of that same brown colour. And I'm softening the bottom of his legs with clean water as I want them to sort of disappear into the grass. Waiting until that's totally dry, then I'm coming back on top with a much stronger mix of the same colour. And again here, just trying to blend his legs into the grass. Again, letting that dry, then coming back on top with a third, even darker layer. And this is where we can start to put in those little details. And I'm just trying to get these markings right. They seem to have this darker stripe with a much lighter tummy. Cast shadow always helps to locate an animal onto the ground. Oh, that's probably a bit dark. Let's just try and knock it back a bit. A few more little long grass details with the end of my brush. Mixed media time, and I'm going to be using a creamy coloured pastel pencil just to add in a few lighter details. I really ought to buy a new one. This one's just getting a little bit too short. Now, if you're a little anxious about painting this gazelle in, then this painting still does work as a nice simple landscape without the little fellow in. And how about a few light coloured grasses? Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. The sky and the ground look like they don't belong together, almost like they're two separate halves. So I'm going to try and link them by adding some of the brown hues of the foreground into the bottom of the sky. So clean water again, then some of that same brown colour to suggest some wispy clouds. Now, I don't want to overdo this, but it just might help to pull these two sections together. Now, this is often the case when you're painting something which doesn't exist. You always have to be prepared to adapt as you go along. I think we're about done, and this one took just over 2 hours. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and you'll give it a go. Whether you paint it with or without the gazelle, it's quite a nice project to do. It's fairly simple, not too challenging. And as I always say, just make it your own, splash around with the colours and have fun. And in the meantime, as always, please don't forget to like. Subscribe if you haven't already, it is free. Leave a comment, I do read every single one, I can't always reply to them all. And of course, I look forward to seeing you all again next week for another Watercolour Wednesday.